4 gods of the Bible.
Hello, I would talk about who is the God of the Bible. My position is: the term God contains at least 4 persons. What is the definition of a God, who has promised you life in heaven? What I have learned from the Wes Penra Papers and New Book 2 and 6 Steps to Waking Up by Dwayne Hepner is: this God is no more than a manager of a particular realm on the astral level. The good people, which belong to the different belief systems, live together in what we call heaven, particular realm on the astral plane. After a certain period of time they are going back to earth for more unconscious lifetimes. And the bad people have their separate temporal residence in the respective realm, which is not so lovely. You know, earth accepts everyone, this is why we have some sort of zoo there on earth. There are many souls with different stages of awareness, which somehow survive together. And we see the circus through ages. So, who is the God of the Bible? Can he answer you, when you sincerely pray to him, asking for help? Definitely yes, but only on his own terms, when the person is willing to move deeper into the illusions, which have been created to keep him trapped and satisfied with his personal choices. Actually, we have many gods on earth. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism have been created in order to subdue people on the subconscious level, as well as mentally and emotionally attach them to the group of Anunnaki lords, which arrived on earth eons ago from the Aryan Empire. The God of the Bible is the composition of different personalities. You may see absolutely identical characters in the Indian, Egyptian, and Greek mythology. When you read the Bible you can discern for yourself who is who in every passage. I love the common known passage from Isaiah 14:12-16 King James Version. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation, in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee, and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms? You see, it refers to the story of Lucifer and Orion Queen and King Anu. Lucifer, the son of Orion Queen, was going to take over the Orion Empire, because he couldn't agree with the decision of the Anu and Queen to appoint his younger brother as the next king. Thus, he has been exiled from the Orion Empire after his failed rebellion for good. As he was incredibly smart, he rather quickly founded his kingdom in the Pleiades, attracting many Pleiadian tribes to his identity. Well, Anu is speaking there in Isaiah 14. But when it goes about the great flood, you may see Lucifer, Enki, is speaking to Noah, his son. He is going to save the human race together with plants and animals by creating the bank of the respecting genomes. Lucifer has created the human race, which contains Orion genes. It was against the law of Orion Empire. His younger brother appealed to the king Anu, and his decision was to destroy the project of Orion Queen, because it has been taken over by her son Lucifer. I would emphasize her son, because Orion Queen has got reproductive system of the bees, which is called parthenogenesis. The queen of the bees needs no fertilization to produce a male, and she certainly requires fertilization to produce a female. Thus, the king Anu seems not to be the father of Enki and Enlil genetically, but again, the queen must be fertilized by the male to start her laying healthy eggs, both males and females. Otherwise, she would produce defective progeny of underdeveloped males only. So, Anu is certainly father of Enki and Enlil in the sense of paternity. By the way, Enki and Enlil are the titles, not names. Enlil is seen in the Old Testament every time, when he is not agree with Enki and is going to commit violence. Enlil has settled in the Persian Gulf and Arabian Peninsula in the beginning. And he has created Islam to restore his kingdom on earth. The most convincing part of the Bible, exposing Enlil, is the scene in Eden. Enlil found that Adam and Eve obtained forbidden knowledge. He deported them, and he put a label of evil serpent on his brother Enki. As for the story about managing Jewish tribe with all the cruelty and violence which have been committed toward the tribe itself and other nations. The story about Moses, who was given the law and 10 commandments, I would address this to Marduk, the son of Enki. He is always furious, jealous, and intolerant there in his intention to subdue one of the human tribes, created by Enki. He even call himself, I am your jealous God. You see, the Bible shows you, he was not lucky in his efforts. The Almighty God could not take over a small tribe on earth. He intimidated Egyptians with the numerous disasters. He used the advanced technology every time, which we are going to achieve again. Marduk became the hidden king on earth today. He replaced both Enki and Enlil. This is why we have all these military conflicts on the Middle East between 4 gods. This is why there are so many different teachings, which belong to the different personalities. Anu, Enlil, Enki, and Marduk have created the diversity of beliefs and spiritual paths, which keep people thinking they found something new and special, but in fact it is all the modern versions of old worshipping, which always leads you to the same character.
Babylon the Great, setting the records false. After the water level from the deluge had subsided and the planet became more stable, it was noted that the northeastern part of Atlantis had managed to stay above the oceanic surface during the flood, and this part of former Atlantis later became the British Isles of today. The Great Stone Circle of Avebury now was used as another interdimensional doorway for various star systems, such as Sirius, the Pleiades, and Arcturus, which were all, to a large degree, now under Enki's dominance. This way, Enki's minions could travel in and out of our solar system into their own star systems, although strict security, which will make our international airport security look like a joke, was certainly in place. Alien invader force leaders promoted to Khan kings, and Enki becomes EA. Minions who had been promoted to leaders of a certain star system or a part of a certain star system, now took on Orion names and titles, such as Khan kings, to mock Khan Enlil's title. Khan is an Orion male title, while Vulcan, Vulcachan, or Vulvican, is female. Both titles are, as they imply, related to the term Ka. Enki and those who were closest to him, belonging to the so-called Enki clan or the House of Enki, now also took on female names and titles, in addition to their original ones, and from the Babylonian times forward, researching the Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian records can be quite confusing and challenging because there is so much syncretism, particularly since Enki and Marduk decided to change things around in the older records. Lucifer no longer used his title Enki, Lord God of Earth, but instead became known as Ea, House of Water, which denotes the primordial waters, another term for the Ka. The term Ea originally stems from Eabzu, which is a title for Khan Enlil. In other words, Ea is not an appropriate title for Lucifer either because he stole it from the real Khan king of Orion. From being able to close the stargates and safeguard the Eridu domain, he promoted himself, and in a sense took Khan Enlil's title, self-proclaimed, of course. I will also mainly call him Ea from Iran because this is one of the dominant titles Lucifer was known as in Babylonian times. Marduk rises to power in Babylon. The Babylonian Akkadian Empire has always been assigned to Marduk. In conventional history, we learn that many different, human, kings were ruling in Babylon and in the vicinities of the empire itself. Although that was true, Marduk was the one in charge behind the scenes. We learn very little about this in conventional history books because if they told us the truth, the historians would need to explain how Marduk could get so old. In fact, you may find references in mainstream history that Marduk actually died and was buried, and his son was Alexander the Great. Whether Alexander really was one of Marduk's bastard sons or not, I don't know, but it would probably be fairly easy to research. However, it's outside the scope of this paper. Lord Ea would never give up his own power, but he let his son Marduk rule while he was busy doing other things. Hence, it seems as if Ea more or less disappeared from history at that point, only to return to power again, apparently with some help from his son, or that's what it looked like, during the time of the Babylonian Empire. Babylon, with a new race of humans evolving who had amnesia and couldn't remember anything prior to their current lifetime, was the era when Ea could claim the supremacy of the gods, imprinting in humans that he was the lord of the universe, and no one else could compete. He did this by having himself and his son taking on the personae of the supreme gods of Orion. They both used alter egos to accomplish this because the old records from ancient times were still around, and they did not have access to them all. Therefore, the best way they could accomplish this was to take on the personae of the gods and goddesses of the heavens. So, when we research the old mythologies, whether it's the Sumerian texts, the Vedas, the Incan mythos, the Mayans, or any other mythology, tradition, or culture, we find the same beings showing up in all parts of the world, under other names. This must be understood by the researcher, or everything else after that will be a series of incorrect conclusions. What many have problems with is that there seems to be an abundance of deities all over the world, and therefore, many think that if these deities are visitors, they must be coming from different star systems, independent from each other. Thus, we talk about the Dracos, the Reptilians, the Nordics, the Greys, the Insectoids, the Praying Mantas, and all the rest of them. In our ignorance, we have created our own illusion of what is going on in the heavens. I am not disputing that all these beings I just mentioned exist in a sort of way, but I do claim, backed up by evidence existing on this planet and not amongst channeled entities, that these star beings are not separate from each other. They generally belong to one of the two sides in the cosmic war. They are either Lucifer's fallen angels, or they belong to Khan Enlil's and Queen Nin's Orion Empire. It's as simple as that, and this is why I have stuck to writing about the Anunnaki, because they are really the visitors to this planet, as far back as 500,000 years, at least. Before that, the Earth was mainly visited by the Orion/Vegan crew, led by Prince Ninurta. In addition, I am not saying that long before Lucifer came to Gaia, there haven't been other civilizations from space who have visited this planet in distant ancient times. Footprints have been found on Earth that are 500 million years old, but these beings, who most people call the Anunnaki, are our so-called aliens. They come from different star systems, and from an interdimensional viewpoint, they may look different from each other, but they are still working for Lucifer. I was listening to a Pleiadian CD the other day, and in that lecture, someone asked them how Pleiadians look like, and I found their answer quite interesting. They said that they themselves, who were speaking on the CD, are refugees from many different star systems and have gathered together to create a more peaceful environment in their part of the Pleiades, and they are energy beings, meaning that they don't have any regular, physical bodies in any dimension, although they can mock one up by changing the form of their avatar. But the Pleiades is vast and consists of many, many different beings. They said that those souls who inhabit physical bodies such as ours, and they are talking about 3D bodies here, are all created following the human template, meaning that they have a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a torso. Then, they explained, the designers can decide how they want to modify the template. Some beings may be small, others may be large and tall, and some can be blue and have psychic abilities, depending on how much DNA is activated, while others have less so. From what I have concluded here, the human form consists of at least 3 different parts: the soul-fire composite, the avatar, mind, light body, and the physical body that we use in the 3rd dimension. The latter is also called the human template, which is not necessarily restricted to our planet. This template always consists of a head, 2 arms, a torso, and 2 legs. However, in our original human form, the primordial womankind, these 3 components, which make up humankind, were basically all one unit. Thus, these 3 units, making up one human, can't exist without each other or we won't be human anymore. Not until the alien invader force tampered with our DNA was there a separation between the physical world and the spirit realm. 500,000 years ago and further back, there was no death. The lack of death was a big part of the whole original experiment. As mentioned in Level 2, Mother Goddess wanted to create this experiment as a living library, existing in the Ka. Many creator gods were involved in the process, and it was done without technology. The living library was a program called Nature, set up in the spirit realm and equivalent to the Ka. It is my understanding that if this would work, it could be a forerunner for similar programs to be created elsewhere in the Milky Way galaxy and in other galaxies as well. It would add a very interesting component to this universe. Also, the goddess wanted to see if beings created as a three-parts unit, in this program called Nature, could evolve into compassionate and loving beings. The whole experiment was supposed to happen in one go, meaning that multi-dimensional beings could hold their position as planetary, stationary entities with an important duty to guard and maintain the library, and at the same time travel across the universe by riding their avatars, so-called nano-travel, when they needed to or wished to do so. If everything went according to the plan, these androgynous beings would become very multifaceted, using all their abilities as multi-dimensional beings with all their DNA developed. There were no strings attached for the souls involved in this project, and they were always welcomed into Orion and the inner sanctuary of the Empire, Satania. Indeed, the Namlu nano-traveled back and forth between Orion and Earth. In charge of this project was Prince Ninurta, stepson of Khan Enlil, son of Queen Nin, and brother of Prince Lucifer. The project went exactly as anticipated, and everybody was happy until the invader force came. Once Lucifer took charge, death came into the picture, death and separation. He created another hologram based on limitations instead of free will and endless possibilities. The Namlu went from being totally free to becoming the ultimate slave race. This was too much for many of them, and they didn't survive. What we usually refer to when we discuss the physical world, or even the physical universe, is all that which we perceive as solid enough to be perceived by our five senses. In other words, we are discussing energy trapped in matter, where matter is condensed energy. The third dimension is a low-frequency band that lacks fluidity. It's similar to putting water in a bucket and then freezing it. It's not fluid anymore. Now think about this really carefully. The aliens are famous for their technology, and they are traveling around in hollowed-out asteroids and planetoids. Is that physical or is it spiritual? It sounds pretty physical to me. Then, many of them need specially designed spacesuits to be able to take their bodies on space journeys. That sounds quite physical to me too. Then, what do? They invade a world that is not physical, planet Earth or Gaia. Thus, we have physical beings invading a spiritual world. Isn't that exactly the opposite from what we have been taught in regards to the Anunnaki? After the invasion, the aliens were quite fast with decreasing the frequency of the planet so that it started vibrating in a lower part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which we today call 3D. In addition, they disconnected the spiritual part of our DNA, if we put it bluntly, which lowered our body frequency to a very solid reality, the so-called physical world, which these beings were so familiar with. Add to this a Pleiadian lecture I listened to a few months ago, where they say that the Anunnaki, yes, they call them that, are not very spiritual beings. They are more into technology. That is correct. These beings are far from spiritual. We, humankind, are the spiritual ones. We are the ones who sit on spiritual knowledge. Isn't it funny then how the invaders have sometimes presented themselves as spiritual teachers? This is why they need us. They need everything that has to do with emotions, spiritual knowledge, and compassion, not only because they lack these but also because without them, how can they get into Orion, which is in the spiritual realm, the spiritual dimensions? In hollowed-out asteroids? No, they need our bodies to get access to the spiritual realm. Although some think that the Anunnaki were actually not mining gold here on Earth, but that the mining had other purposes, I am pretty sure that gold and precious stones were what they were after. What I don't believe, however, is that they dug for gold in order to enhance the atmosphere of some nebulous planet called Nibiru. They needed gold, and lots of it, mainly for a totally different purpose, and we have touched on that before as well. If the invaders were actually much more physical beings than we are, then there may be an urge for them to stay alive and not dying over and over again, or even more important, perhaps, they don't want to grow old if they can help it. This is one aspect of it, but even more likely than that is that gold enhances the bioelectricity of the body and the brain, and thus these beings can function on a higher level, in a higher capacity. Eventually, This also increases the size of the cranium. Thus, we find elongated skulls all over the planet, and if we look at the skulls of many pharaohs, Nefertiti and Tutankhamun are perfect examples. I am not saying that all beings with elongated skulls achieve those by inhaling gold, but some of them probably did. If gold enhances the brain power of these beings, they may also have found a way to increase their lives with help from technology. We know that Earth has an abundance of gold if we dig for it, and had even more so 500,000 years ago, so this planet must have been a real gold mine, literally and figuratively speaking, for them. All the digging they did all over the planet, and there is a lot of evidence for it, was probably well worth it. A word of caution here, however. I do not recommend that we humans experiment with gold, especially if we are not totally sure of what we're doing. I'd like to place a last note on the Anunnaki and their physicality. Some readers may ask themselves how these beings can be more physical than we are, when they, in fact, can move in and out of the dimensions. I can understand if this thought comes to mind, but the truth of the matter is that the invaders only have access to 8 dimensions, something I've mentioned a few times in the papers, which are the dimensions of the physical universe. The dimensions above the first 8 are the upper Ka'a dimensions, or the spiritual universe, to which the alien force have no access. Now we have established that the bioelectricity that runs through our physical bodies is very important to the aliens. Each time we enhance our bioelectricity, they want to be there and take advantage of it if they can. Therefore, it's quite easy to imagine that they want to have us monitored and under surveillance, especially in these times when so much preparation is being made. The increased surveillance is justified under the nation's security laws and regulations. The invader force and the global elite haven't gone through all this effort with creating global terrorism for nothing. We know that as a consequence of staged events, such as 9/11, school shootings etc., our freedoms are taken away from us, one by one, and the government is telling us that it's all for the good because by doing so, it's easier for them to protect us. The majority of the population seems to believe this to be true. If people only realized what they are doing when they are letting the authorities find out everything about them in order to protect them, they would be horrified. Not only that, they are also monitoring us from the lower astral, something we also mentioned earlier. When we have sex here on Earth and we are having orgasms, these register in the astral, and in higher dimensions, and look something similar to lightning striking upward, into the void. They can immediately see if it is a female or a male orgasm depending on the intensity and nature of it. Sometimes it happens that 2 people having sex have orgasms simultaneously, which is extra powerful. Orgasms open the chakras and release bioelectricity into the Ka, all the way to the highest of dimensions and the highest of the electromagnetic spectrum. This is the energy the aliens wants to collect and store for their own use, both in present time and in the future. This also means that very little of the bioelectricity that is released actually reaches the goal, which is the inner sanctuaries of the Ka. Most of the energies are hijacked somewhere on the way.